Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Michael McTeer, and this is Murder in Michigan. Donald Gene Miller. In late 1976, a young man proposed to his girlfriend whom he had met while attending East Lansing High School in central Michigan. She quickly accepted. Shortly after Christmas of that same year, Martha Sue Young had a change of heart and called the wedding off. Despite his pleas, she stubbornly refused to marry her longtime boyfriend. New Year's Eve. Only 3 days later, Martha met up with her estranged ex-boyfriend. It would be their last meeting. Donald Gene Miller, a criminal law major at Michigan State University, would assault Martha and strangle her to death. After multiple witness interviews, the police quickly determined that Miller was the last person to see the now-missing Young alive. Miller went under an excruciating interrogation, but would only admit to having slept with Martha. He insisted he dropped her off at her home around 2 a.m. Since they didn't have a body at the time or any solid evidence, Miller was set free. Martha Sue Young would be Donald Gene Miller's first victim. On October 20th, 1977, Martha's purse and clothes were found by hunters near a small lake in Bath, Michigan. The police concluded that the killer had placed them there after the killing. 8 months later, 27-year-old Marita Chockett, an assistant editor for a local TV station, was attacked by Miller. He would viciously stab her 17 times, cut off both her hands, and dispose of the body in Aladon Township. Less than 2 weeks later, 21-year-old Michigan State student Wendy Bush would become Miller's third victim. Witnesses claimed to have last seen her with an unknown tall white male. Bush would never be seen alive again. His fourth and last successful murder came about a little over 2 weeks later. 30-year-old school teacher Christine Stewart would be attacked on her way home from a local garage. Miller would briefly speak with Miss Stewart before strangling her and dumping her body outside of town. Final attack. Miller's final attack would end in complete chaos, and it would prove to be his demise. Knocking on a random house door, he would find 14-year-old Lisa Gilbert home alone. Miller talked his way into the house and, without warning, assaulted the overmatched teen. He proceeded to tie Lisa up, rape her, and attempt to kill her. However, Miller would be interrupted by the return of Lisa's 13-year-old brother, Randy. Randy had returned home to find his older sister under attack. Miller quickly turned his attention from Lisa to Randy. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lisa ran into the street completely naked. She was quickly noticed by neighbors, who would rush to her aid. Meanwhile, although all signs point to Randy fighting bravely, he was no match for the much larger Miller. Randy would be choked, stabbed 3 times, and left for dead before Miller would attempt his escape. Witnesses memorized the make and license plate number of the car in which Miller would flee the scene. This was the big break police needed, and they quickly moved to finally make an arrest. Shortly thereafter, Miller was found in his apartment acting as if nothing had happened. He was quickly taken into custody and charged for the attack on the Gilbert children. Attorneys for Miller claimed he was insane and suffered from multiple personality disorder, but an evaluation by a psychiatrist found no such disorder and concluded that Miller was actually highly intelligent. He was even accused of attempting to manipulate the evaluator. Spring 1979. The trial of Donald Gene Miller, age 24, would last 2 weeks. Miller would be found guilty of the rape and attempted murder of Lisa and Randy Gilbert. He was originally sentenced to 50 years in prison with the chance for parole after 30 years. But almost immediately, Miller was also charged with Martha Young's murder, even though the case was weak and with only circumstantial evidence against him. Knowing that a conviction was not guaranteed, prosecutors begrudgingly accepted a plea deal from Miller's attorney. First-degree murder charges would be dropped to involuntary manslaughter, and Miller would retain the chance for parole. In exchange, Miller promised to lead authorities to the bodies of the remaining victims. Explanations. In later interviews, Miller would reveal that he killed Martha Young in a fit of rage after she told him she wanted nothing more to do with him. It was her death sentence. Miller would also reveal that he killed Wendy Bush in an MSU parking lot. Apparently, Wendy, who knew Miller, had repeatedly spurned his invites to go out on a date. He would kill her for her rejections. Martha Choquette was actually friends with Miller and had been invited over for breakfast. For reasons unexplained, immediately after breakfast, he would attack her, handcuff her, and eventually kill his friend. He further explained that he had to cut her hands off because he was unable to get the handcuffs open. Finally, as for Christine Stewart, Miller would mistakenly identify Stewart as the presumably already dead Martha Young. Miller saw Stewart and, thinking it was Martha, panicked and ran her down in the field. Realizing his mistake, he initially tried to aid Stewart, but then decided to strangle and dispose of the body. His sentence for his atrocities would outrage many in the community. According to the plea deal, Miller was sentenced to only 15 years in prison with the chance of parole after 10. It was an extremely cheap price for the lives of 4 innocent young women. 1989 through 2023. After serving 10 years in prison and in keeping with his plea agreement, Miller applied for parole. He would be denied. He would continually try, but his refusal to attend any sex offender rehabilitation programs or show any remorse led the board to find him a continued danger to society, and his parole was denied each time. His next parole hearing is in 2027, and, if denied, he is scheduled to be released at the conclusion of his sentence in 2031. He will be 77 years old. Donald Gene Miller was the son of a middle-class family. The Millers were considered to be upstanding citizens and law-abiding people. Donald played the trombone in his high school band and was even a youth minister in his church. But he changed. What turned the seemingly well-adjusted teenage boy into a vicious serial killer? We may never know. Until next time, this is Michael McTeer for Murder in Michigan. Good night, everyone, and stay safe.